Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Pan African Prison, your number one stop for every single African story that the entire 52, 53 countries across Africa. And I dare say, yes, it is about time that we carefully, get to have this conversation. All right, we definitely know that this is about the time that we carefully will converse and talk about the African stories the very best way it is, from the streets of Nairobi to the tech hub in South Africa, Durban, and of course the hustling and bustling city of Lagos, Nigeria, all across Africa. We have this conversation, and today it's not going to be making any difference. So much to talk about today. The former vice president of Nigeria, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, has said that they are competing with thieves. Who is he referring to? Now, this is getting into the 27 general political space in Nigeria. Also, we're talking about President William, who again, some are saying is under fire because the ICC seems not to be quiet on this one. Carefully, I must say, the ICC again, looking at that particular conversation surrounding the Gen Z protest and the consistent attacks by the goons in Kenya. These and more is what we're talking about. And I dare say it's about time that we talk about it. Also, mass kidnapping in Nigeria. Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, orders manhunt after hundreds were abducted. See, these and more is what we will be talking about today. And I dare say it is about time that you join us today right here on PETV Media. Well, again, I would not be talking about these alone. I have several fine gentlemen across Africa who will be making sense of most and all of the stories that we will be talking about today. And of course, they are already in the studio with me right now. And I dare say we are very, very ready to go. Without wasting further time, let's take a very short break. When we return, we'll be going straight to dealing with the stories itself. Please stay with us. All right, then, glad to have you back. It is about time that we have this conversation. Yes, it is Pan African Prism right here on your number one station for everything conversation across Africa and, of course, across the world. And I'm talking about your very own PETV media. All right, without wasting further time, let's jump right into it. The president of Nigeria have carefully given an order, and that order is what we are looking at today. And what is that order that the president has given? Well, interestingly, the president of Nigeria has carefully given President Bola Tinubu has ordered security agencies to launch an immediate rescue operation after an armed attack in Niger State, in which several persons were reportedly abducted, with about 30 deaths reported, and the exact number of abductees remains unconfirmed, making this a major controversy over Nigeria's worsening security situation. Well, a new SBM International report published also says Nigerian gunmen collected nearly $5.8 million in ransom payments between July 2025 and June 2026, with about 7,825 people abducted and 1,142 killed. Well, these is the conversation that we are looking at today. And I dare say, yes, like you are seeing on the screen, we have these fine gentlemen to help us make sense of these stories and more, not just the Nigerian story, but also stories emanating from East Africa, West and South Africa. All of this we'll be talking about. And today we are definitely going to be having so much fun. I have with me here Professor XN Iraqi. Prof is the professor with the University of Nairobi. He joins us live virtually from Kenya. A very good afternoon to you, Prof. Thank you for joining the conversation this afternoon.
Good afternoon, and how are you?
I'm fine, very well, thank you. Also, joining us, Jumbo. I can never forget that. I can never forget that. Also joining us virtually today, all the way from Kenya as well, is another amazing gentleman, and he is Mr. Sintati Wasilwa. Mr. Sintati is the APAC Assistant Lead Analyst and Manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. He's also public and political affairs analyst and commentator. Mr. Sintati, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining the conversation virtually live from Nairobi as well.
Good afternoon to you too, David, and I'm happy to see you.
All right, then. Thank you so very much. Well, I see Dr. Joseph Opu joined us virtually from Uganda. Again, I think network is just not being friendly at this point, but definitely we'll be expecting him to join the conversation again. Okay, so I see him join the conversation again. Doctor, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining the conversation today.
Yeah, good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to my colleagues in the studio. I am seeing Professor Iraqi. I'm seeing my brother Sitati. I don't know whether I'm able to mention the names very accurately. Greetings from Uganda.
Oh, well.
My name is Opulu Joseph. Greetings.
Well, thank you. Thank you so very much, Dr. Joseph Opu. Now, Dr. Joseph is a doctoral fellow at the university, the Gulu University of Dar es Salaam, and he's also the director of Opu Skilling Foundation in Uganda. So yes, he joins us virtually live from Uganda. All right, then let's start off this conversation from Nigeria here, where the presidency has actually asked that security agencies across the country carefully launch an immediate rescue operation after an armed attack in Niger State, a state here in the northern part of Nigeria, in which several people were reportedly abducted, with about 30 deaths also reported in that particular story. Now, the exact numbers of abductees remains unconfirmed right now because there are several figures flying all around the place, but making this a major controversial situation over Nigeria's worsening insecurity situation. Now, I'm going to start off with you, Prof. A new SBM intelligence report published also says Nigerian gunmen has collected at about $5.8 million in ransom payments between July 2025 and June 2026, with about 7,825 people abducted. Prof, what is your reaction to this particular story? Because there's so much surrounding this story, and of course, a lot of people have said that the presidency is not doing enough at all in that regards. What's your take?
Now, but let me give you the interesting context. About 2 or 3 years ago, I came to Abuja. And when I was getting out of the airport, I saw a very big signboard of terrorists. People were being looked for because of participating in banditry and other terrorist activities, as it was put on the wall. So 2-3 years later, to read that this is what's happening in Nigeria is very sudden. because the rest of Africa looks at Nigeria as a role model in terms of economics, in terms of innovations, and in terms of other leadership. So when we see reports of banditry and the ransom and the people dying, we feel for Nigeria, because Nigeria is a big country, Nigeria is a leader, and we would expect that such banditry activities should stop. So I think it gives an idea of inactivity, an idea of indecision, and an idea that the terrorists are winning. So we need decisive action so that we don't have such reports coming from Africa's biggest country.
Now, this is becoming, one too many on the part of, the security situation in Nigeria. And I'm still staying with you, Prof, because a lot has been said, particularly on how much of, the involvement of security operatives in this particular situation. Now, looking at the fact that, yes, some are saying there is no major political will. The administration, again, has also said they inherited insecurity, but it has now been, they've been in office over 3 years. At what point does that line, we inherited the problem, cease to be valid explanation and becoming and of course becoming an excuse? Because conversely, it is intellectually honest for the opposition to blame every kidnapping, especially and entirely on the present administration, when the crisis clearly predates it by more than a decade. Talking about the fact that the same administration, the same political party is what is still in power. Prof, your take.
I think when the new administration got into power, I'm sure they promised that they are going to add banditry, they are going to add such acts of insecurity. So 3 years later, they cannot start blaming the previous administration. So they need to take responsibility. And let's be sincere. If Nigeria only cannot add this problem, there's ECOWAS, there is African Union, there is United Nations. They are friendly countries to Nigeria. So why can't they bring help and help bring peace to Nigeria? So I think we need to run out of excuses and take decisive action to make sure there is peace and security in Nigeria, because that is affecting the rest of our neighboring countries. Nigeria trades with other countries. Nigeria has relationships with neighboring countries. So that spillover is affecting everybody else. And I think it is a time, if Nigeria cannot be able to solve that problem, call for help. They can get help from the others.
Interesting. Well, you did say call for help. Just a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump sent in the U.S. Army into Nigeria, which again, they also did recorded some results by taking out some ISIS commanders in that the northern part of Nigeria, where this particular situation is in majorly. But as we speak, the part of kidnapping, looking at that SBM report, Prof, before I let you go, I'm still staying with you. Looking at that SBM report, do you think that the government is doing well enough? Because again, there is a conversation about the fact that ransom has been paid, but the government is saying no ransom is being paid. Look, just opposing that together with the reality of the fact that kidnapping, banditry, and the likes is still consistent. Your take as well.
I think my verdict is the government has not done enough. I think we should see reduction in banditry and such activities. And my biggest word I can tell you for free is that there are a lot of such activities in West Africa, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, and the Sahel. So I fear that if Nigeria does not take decisive action, what is happening in Sahel is going to be imported to Nigeria with unintended consequences in West Africa. So we want a decisive action, no excuses. Peace should be prevail in Nigeria.
All right, then let me take this conversation to you of course still stay in Kenya. Mr. Sintati, this is again one that it is a major and just when the Prof was mentioned border countries. Now let me state it out here. Niger State, where this particular kidnapping did happen, borders the Republic of Benin, and of course Reuters reported that violence associated with the current incident displaced people towards neighboring Benin Republic. How porous do you think the Nigerian borders can be to arms, fighters, and criminal networks? Because, I mean, again, is ECOWAS level security cooperation strong enough to deal with the cross-border dimension of insecurity that has bedeviled or that is bedeviling Nigeria as we speak?
Well, David, from my point of view, the fact of the matter remains that the insecurity that is rampant within Nigeria, the sole responsibility lies with the Nigerian government. This is not the first time that we are having such incidents happening in Nigeria. You remember even in Borno State and other northern states in Nigeria, and other states within the northern central
Yes.
part of Nigeria are also faced with the challenge of, the threat of banditry, terrorism, militia attacks from the Fulani herdsmen, whatever. So at the bottom end of it is the fact that this challenge has been persisting for a pretty long period of time. So it only points out to the failures of the state governments and the national government to address this particular issue. So the
Mm,
question at this time should be
mm.
what President Bola Tinubu done over the last 3 close to 4 years that he's been in office to address the challenge of insecurity. In as much as Nigeria is surrounded by other troubled states,
Interest?
starting from the Lake Basin, which is armed groups such as Boko Haram, the Islamic State of West Africa province, which occupy those troubled areas in
Mm.
Cameroon, stretching to Chad, the other side of Niger, Burkina Faso to Mali. I mean, in as much as there's a lack of a coherent regional approach to addressing these issues, I think the individual states and governments take sole responsibility at the end of the day. Coordination is important. But I mean, even the current or the ongoing cross-border coordinations in that particular region have not really yielded tangible results from what we have seen. So I guess this calls into question what is the level of competence of the Nigerian government in addressing these issues?
All right, then. Well, you can be a part of this conversation if you're watching us live right here on PETV Media by just going straight to the comment section and let your voice be heard. And I can tell you for a fact that in a couple of minutes from now, we'll also be opening up the portal so that you can join and also ask these gentlemen some other questions that you desire to ask them all across Africa. And of course, the stories that we're bringing to you as we progress. Well, in case you're just tuning in, we're practically extracting the security, the insecurity situation in Nigeria, and basically the intense conversation in all of this. Now, let me stay with you, Mr. Sintati, looking at the economical part of this. Now, the IMF says the Nigeria's reform have improved a macroeconomy, which again is what the present administration is also talking about as the macroeconomic stability, and estimates growth at around 4% in 2025 and 4.1 in 2026. Yet, the same IMF says poverty and food insecurity remain severe and insecurity continues to undermine agriculture. Can the government honestly claim economic transformation if millions of Nigerians cannot safely farm, travel, and also even trade or even send their children to school, like we see several abductions across the parts of Nigeria? Mr. Sintati.
What I have to say at this particular juncture, David, is the fact that the poor economic performance of Nigeria, or the low level of, structural transformation of the Nigerian economy, is one of the factors why insecurity keeps persisting in Nigeria. I mean, kidnapping is a thriving industry in Nigeria. This is not something new. It's been going on for quite a long period of time. It's not new. So as long as the Nigerian government does not go back to the basics of governance, I mean, having a thriving economy, then insecurity will persist across Nigeria. And you can imagine with the huge population of Nigeria, I mean, and the large number of young people who are coming out of the learning institutions and joining the job market, and they're frustrated, where do you want them to go? I mean, huge number. So one of the easiest things, or one of the easiest, vices for them to practice is insecurity. If you offer a young person, or a young person sees that there's an opportunity, to make some, to create some livelihood by maybe butchering people or stealing property.
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm.
they are going to readily do that. The incentives of being a criminal are seemingly higher than joining the formal job market in Nigeria. So, Nigerian government does not create the necessary, the conducive environment to be able to, attract local
Yes.
entrepreneurship, attract regional and global investments. I guess this is an issue which is going to persist for a very long time, David.
Quite unfortunately, really, take this conversation to Uganda. Now, Doctor, you are in the education sector, basically, and I say this because I know this for a fact. Young people are being traumatized by the level of kidnapping that is experienced in some parts of Nigeria. Now, this is a major talking point across Nigeria. Nigeria also has what they call the Nigeria Safe School, where, of course, Nigeria developed a safe school financing program worth roughly 144.86 billion naira for 2023 to 2026. Yet, hundreds of students and teachers have reportedly been abducted from schools during this administration. The question now would be, is the program inadequate funding, poor implementation, or corruption, or even weak coordination, or simply that the strategy itself is not working at all? Doctor, your take.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I would like to concur with my colleagues, their submission on the state of affairs in Nigeria, the abductions, the killings, the rapings, and many more others. And remember that many of the people who are being targeted or who are victims are largely women, children, and many more others. This is very absurd to be happening in the 21st century. And yesterday, in one of our discussions, I was saying that, yeah, Africa is acquiring guns at different levels. But for killing who? Killing our relatives, our brothers, and many more others. But then, what is even more perturbing is that the Nigerian jihad is more stronger than the Nigerian army. It's something that can disturb. Because the Nigerian army, all the forces, police, the army, and many more others, are here to provide security for the people of Nigeria and the property of the people of Nigeria. Now, if the government in Nigeria is weaker, will the Boko Haram and many other criminal groups in Nigeria take over government? And one of the motivating factors, or the demotivating factors from the side of the government, all the bandits, the Islamic groups, the what and so on, they are not targeting government. But the day they will start targeting government, that they want power, is the day those groups will end. They will come to an end immediately. Immediately. So my other colleague was stating that the economic issues. If you look at the motivating factors, I've been trying to study what motivates young people to go into those various groups, not only here in Uganda. Even if you look at what is taking place in the Gaza Strip, many of the the Hamas who abducted the Israelis about 2 years ago, one of the motivating factor was the money. If you abducted one person, you get $10,000. I don't know for the case of Nigeria how much is being paid. So until we address the issues of poverty, which is affecting the Nigerians, issues of unemployment, which is affecting Nigerians, of course, don't forget that the borders are porous. But even if the borders are porous, when the bandits know that the price of destabilizing peace in a certain country is very, very high, no one would dare go there. But because they know that they have always done it, they will always do it, we are going to do it, and nothing much is happening. Now, you can imagine if the children in schools are being abducted, the parents, the teachers, and many more others. Every time I keep reading, watching this on TV, I keep wondering if I go to Nigeria, won't they abduct me as well? And you are saying that whatever is happening in Nigeria does not only affect neighbors, it affects the whole of Africa. It affects the image of Africa at the global stage. Many people want to visit Nigeria. Many people want to do trade in Nigeria. But no matter how small those bandits are, they are painting a bad image for Nigeria and for the whole of Africa. So the earlier the Nigerian government rises to their feet, because for now, I can confidently say that the Nigerian government has slept on job. That is sleeping on job. You cannot even blame the person who was there before you. Even yourself, who is currently right now there, you have no excuse whatsoever, because we have very strong force, one of the biggest economies in Africa and in the world. Everyone wants to come to Nigeria, but those small issues happening in Nigeria give us a very bad picture, and we are in pain. Even as we are in Uganda, each time you hear the abducted girls, sometimes they send pictures how they are slaughtered, how they were slaughtered, and all this, and it doesn't paint a good image. And even then, even the bandits themselves, why do you target weak women? Why do you target weak children? Why don't you go for the president? Go for the members of parliament? Why don't you go for the forces? They go for army commander. Go for the soldiers. You see. So I'm really very disturbed about what is taking place there. And you're asking, is it the strategy?
Yes, go ahead.
You're asking whether it is a strategy. You're asking whether it's a strategy. Certainly, the bandits, the criminals, have a very fertile ground to do whatever they want to do. But the moment they find very thorny ground, they will even cease to exist in Nigeria. So my conclusion on that is that the president and all those in the government in Nigeria who have been given trust by the Nigerian people should step on their feet and should pull up their socks so that we have peace once and for all in Nigeria. Thank you.
All right. Well, let me still stay with you. And I need a quick answer to this, Doctor. Looking at the development, now the SBM report also said that 7,825 were abducted. If these particular figures were abducted between July 2023 and June 2026, that's like a reported 66% increase. What exactly went wrong with the government's existing anti-kidnapping architecture? Because yes, these things, according to the government, they are there. In fact, the presidency did rejig his security architecture by, of course, changing his security chiefs. But are we looking at the failure of intelligence, policing, or even the military deployment? Because again, you did say earlier, border control looks a bit porous. But at the point of the local government level, or even the political will, is that what we are looking at? Are we looking at a failure of intelligence, a failure of policing, a failure of military deployment, a failure of border control? What exactly are we looking at?
David and my colleagues, you must know that much as we are talking about the economic gains, or what are the economic motivators on the side of the criminals, the jihadist group, Boko Haram and the rest. Also, from the government point of view, there must be economic motivators. There must be political motivators among some of the people who are working in government, either government as an institution or individuals in government. And remember that if you study military science, there must be people within government who leak information to Boko Haram. There must be people in government who leak intelligence, who even give them details. Because in the army, they say that intelligence is the eye of the war. You can never win any war when you don't have intelligence. So therefore, there are people in government, in the Nigerian government, either in the military or individuals who must be selling information to Boko Haram and many more other bandits. Where do they get their military equipment? Chances are high that don't be shocked that they could be getting some of their military fatigue, uniform, and all those within or among some of the people in the army of Nigeria. So until also internally, the government of Nigeria can do house cleaning, that what is motivating these people to do so? Otherwise, the war will never cease, will never stop. The war will continue and continue because internally within the Nigerian government, there are leakages, especially you're talking about intelligence. That is very, very, very key. Very, very key. Do they fail to detect this Boko Haram when they are coming to steal the people? And where do they get all their intelligence mechanisms?
Huge question.
Not from government, or if they're not getting from government. Because I am very sure that the Nigerian army is highly well equipped than the bandits. Unless if someone is telling me that the bandits are well equipped than the Nigerian army, than the entire government of Nigeria, of course it can't be so. And therefore, if the Nigerian government is well facilitated militarily, economically, and all those.
Oh dear. I think we have a bit of drag with his network there. All right, let me take this. Well, while we possibly we're waiting for him to maybe come back, let me go back to you, Prof. And again, this is also particularly on the conversation of the 5.8 billion naira question. Now, SBM intelligence says Nigerians paid about 7.78 billion naira. That's roughly about $5.8 billion in confirmed ransom in 1 year. That's according to the SBM intelligence report, while warning that the real figure may be considerably higher. Now, at what point, really, Prof, does kidnapping stop being merely a criminal problem and becoming a parallel illicit economy financing armed groups? Because this looks like it's becoming a major monster that it's cutting across. It's not just in Nigeria anyways, but then, Prof, your reaction to that particular report as well.
Let me remind you that, as my friend from Kenya will tell you, one of the most popular literature in Kenya is Nigerian literature, not just Chinua Achebe, but the very many writers. And we have read about the Nigerian Civil War. We know what happened from the novels and write-up. So anytime we hear about chaos in Nigeria, we have that context at the back of our mind. So when I see so much money being paid for ransom, the most obvious economic reasoning is it is very lucrative. Somebody is making money. So if people are making money from ransom, then if I make 5 million and somebody else makes 10 million, the temptation is for somebody else to take 20 million, to make 20 million. So it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, and somebody must break it. So one of my biggest worries is that some of you have come across a scarecrow. And if you're not very careful, you might think a scarecrow is something real. But when you try to scare it, you find there's nothing. So it might be that the reason is why Nigeria is having a lot of insecurity is because even before Boko Haram and others started these battery activities, maybe the government was weak. Maybe the government had certain weaknesses that the bandits are exploiting. So we need to systematically find out why the government is not able to fight bandits. Because it is growing in two ways, insecurity and also in terms of money. And once money is involved, you end up bringing a lot of people into that side. Remember now that one of the areas that is being affected is education. And you cannot start kidnapping school teachers, kidnapping students, and taking them away, because you even make the remaining people more militant. If the government cannot protect me, then I probably myself. Now, if more people make money from ransom, other people start losing because of insecurity, then you make people militant. And that is why somebody must prickle that bubble and make sure that insecurity is restored in Nigeria. A big paradox. You cannot grow the economy if there's banditry, if there is insecurity. So you need to have a starting point, bring insecurity so that there can be economic growth and there is peace. The two of them are interrelated. And I think we need to spend less time talking about what is happening in Nigeria and see concrete measures that is going to reduce this insecurity.
In other words, you're saying we should ask for help.
That's what I said from the beginning. If Nigerians cannot solve that problem, let them ask for help from us or from anywhere else. Kenya has been sending peacekeeping force to other countries. The United Nations has been sending peacekeeping force. Why can't we do the same? What is the purpose of United Nations? What is the purpose of ECOWAS? What is the purpose of organizations like African Union? This is the time they should rise up and be counted.
Now I'm going to stay with you, Prof, because again, what you just mentioned now is quite a very interesting one. Now, looking at institutions, you did mention ECOWAS, and of course, you did mention the African Union. These are bodies that are supposed to have stand-alone army, but as we speak, there is none in existence. How can that also be an issue? Because again, we're talking Nigeria, just like you said. There are other nations across Africa that are also experiencing this level of insecurity. If a body like the African Union, a body like ECOWAS, which again is supposed to be a major help in times like this, is not helping, then how safe is the institutions, as it were?
You know, it is interesting. One of the reasons why Nigeria is having insecurity is clearly because of the failure of institutions. Because any country that has strong institutions doesn't have insecurity. So if the people in Nigeria or African countries cannot build strong institutions, let's get for help from others. That is why probably a person like maybe why President Trump was coming to help Nigeria. So if we cannot do things ourselves, if we cannot solve our problems, let's not be ashamed and look for help. After all, Nigeria is so strategically located that we cannot let that country fail. The population size, the number of innovative people, the amount of oil, we cannot let Nigeria fail. So if you cannot solve your problems as Nigerians, call for help. We are willing to help.
Interested. Kenya is willing to help. I like that part. Now, let me go back to Mr. Sintati. Again, this development is one that a lot of, a lot of questions are being touted around it. Now, the government on their part figures points. I mean, they are saying that thousands of rescued kidnapping victims and major successful military operations have happened under their watch. I mean, it's neither here nor there. But the question now is, if the security forces are capable of rescuing hundreds of people in major operations, why have they not been able to systematically dismantle the network responsible for repeatedly carrying out this kidnapping? And we're talking soft spots here, Mr. Sintati. Your reaction as well.
Look, any other government in the world, but this habit is particularly notorious in Africa, would always want to try to sugarcoat things, say, oh, we have tried to resolve this issue, these are the successes. But I mean, if the challenge is persisting, then fundamentally there is the urgent need to go down to, the intricacies of the matter. Why is the threat of banditry persisting in Nigeria, despite the fact that there have been operations, to rescue civilians who've been kidnapped by these armed groups? It simply points out to the fact that there is a limited state presence, the presence of the state at this particular hotspot areas remains contested. And I think Niger State is a very good example. If you've been observing the trends of, the banditry attacks in Niger State and many others, Katsina, Kaduna, and others in the northern and central part of Nigeria. I mean, this is an issue which has been increasing. Look at the levels, the amounts of ransom paid every year. Track it over the last 5 10 years. Generally, it's an upward trend. Look at the number of kidnapping incidents and the attacks, the number of civilians killed, injured, abducted. I mean, the numbers are not going down. So much as the Nigerian government is conducting these operations to rescue the civilians who've been kidnapped, abducted by this group, the fact of the matter remains that the challenge is not yet over. So it simply indicates that the fundamentals are wrong. Number one, the economic issues are pretty much in contestation. So that simply means that if at all these issues to be uprooted, then the basics have to be addressed. Now, our co-panelists from Uganda made a very, very, decent argument, and said that in as much as these groups are in existence, then there is the urgent need to call into question what type of factors exist at the government level. Is it that we are having fellows within government who sort of leaking intelligence that help perpetuate the presence of these groups in various parts of Nigeria? So it's a complex issue, but if the I have always argued in many other circles that if African governments wanted to finish off these challenges that are facing us, then nothing really prevents them, if at all they want to do that. The only challenge is that
How do you
we
think they're
have
going to do that?
governments. I mean, what prevents them? They have the budgets. If they want to increase the budgets, nothing prevents them. If they want external assistance, like Professor Iraqi has mentioned, nothing really prevents them. After all, if you look at the protocols and other provisional, prescriptions by the Economic Community of West African States, such kinds of, measures have been clearly stipulated that if at all a given state, a member state, is facing insecurity challenges or challenges that threaten to destabilize the presence of the state, then they can be able to call for, external assistance. And we have seen even within the context of the African Union, I mean, any member state is free to call for that. However, external military assistance and intervention in the case of Africa has come to a point whereby it largely relies on funding from other external actors. Look at the example of Somalia. I mean, the peacekeeping mission now in Somalia is in jeopardy because apparently the United States is pulling out funding from the United Nations, and those are the challenges. So
Right.
I guess it is time for the African Union to, try to reposition itself, because otherwise, if we cannot solve these challenges over 60 years since many African countries gained independence, then surely you can only imagine that we are facing a bleak future across this continent.
Interesting. Now, let me go back to Prof. And something popped up while you were talking, but I needed to just go to the Statintati a bit. There is also the conversation about rehabilitation of these terrorists by the Nigerian military. This, again, is a conversation that has been so much in the hearts of Nigerians, to the point where they say, how do you rehabilitate one who has taken lives of our loved ones? Now, on the part of the morale of the military, how much of that kind of act would be visibly be a morale to the military?
It's interesting how Africans are forgiving. We are very forgiving. If you remember what happened in Kenya or Nigeria or African countries during the colonial era, there were very serious colonial atrocities. But after we got independence, now we find those countries are the ones we want to go to. We want to go to Britain. We want to go to France. We want to go to those countries. So we are very forgiving. Now, the problem is, if we forgive the terrorists and rehabilitate them, then what are we telling the soldiers? That you sacrificed your life for nothing. You cannot have killed my brother, my sister, and so on. Then I rehabilitate and make you make peace with you. But I think is probably a tool or an avenue we can try. So if people are rehabilitatable, and by rehabilitating them, they can give you intelligence, as my Ugandan friend put it, They can be remorseful. They can tell you where the terrorists are hiding. They can give information about the main fathers. Then that probably should work, and it has always worked elsewhere. But I think it is double-edged. It might make a lot of security forces very annoyed because they might appear to be doing no work. But if rehabilitation can be useful in the way I have described, why not try it?
Okay, well, again, I'm still, a bit taken aback by the development of this particular situation, and we definitely will be jumping to another story in a bit. But still staying with you, Prof, you did say it will dampen the morale of the military forces. Now, with the development of the fact that just recently a Nigerian army is taking home 100,000 naira in the lived reality of Nigeria, that is, I'm going to try and break it down to how much it is in dollars while we continue this conversation. But my take in this particular situation that I've mentioned is that the Minister of Defense came out publicly saying that the military officers should now be happy that they are taking home such an amount of money. With the lived reality of Nigeria presently, that particular, okay, a bag of rice in Nigeria is about 70,000 naira, 60, 70,000 naira. And a Nigerian army goes home with 100,000. Just recently, anyways, it's not been like that before. How much of that would help the morale of the Nigerian army who has given their life to the cause of safeguarding the entire nation?
I would probably ask a bigger question. Apart from 100,000 naira, what are the other benefits? For example, are they insured? If you die, what would happen to your children and your family? Because it's a big sacrifice to be a soldier to go and fight bandits. So maybe I probably should agree with my colleague that we also must look at the incentive system of the fighters. Because if they feel they don't get enough incentives, they will probably sell information, they will probably defect, they will probably cooperate with the terrorists. And unfortunately, when they start behaving like that, you run the risk of the country becoming horror, and then you end up sucking in people like African Corps, the Wagner Group, who will come and say, we are going to help the government, but they also have their own vested interests. But I want us to be very blunt, because the Nigerian problem can only be solved by Nigerians. The rest can only help us. So help them. So if they don't diagnose their problem very well, if they don't know exactly who is who, then the problem is going to persist for a long time. When I led the issue of Boko Haram and the bandits in the north, I thought that was a one-off event. But now you can see 5, 6 years, the problem is still persisting. So we must get the root cause and uproot it so that there can be peace in Nigeria.
Okay. Now, let me take this conversation to Mr. Sintati. I think the bit of network issues have held back Dr. Joseph, but I'm hoping that he joins in the conversation a bit as we continue. Now, let's move to the part of ransom. I don't know about any financial institution in Kenya, and maybe you're going to correct me at this point. Are accounts traceable by the likes of the central bank, right, of Kenya? That's on one hand. But my question now would be, the military can pursue gunmen in forests, but can Nigeria actually trace the bank accounts, telecommunication channels, intermediaries, cryptocurrency transactions, livestock markets, and all the financial networks through which kidnapping proceeds are converted into weapons and logistics? Now, this is one conversation that a lot are not even having to talk about. Your take on that as well?
Well, nothing really prevents the Nigerian government and the specific governing institutions from tracking and tracing the financial, benefits that come from, or are associated with these particular armed groups that benefit through, like ransoms paid from the victims or by the victims, for that matter. In any case, I think the best starting point should be to question what are the levels of corruption in Nigeria? I think that should be the starting point. What are the levels of corruption in Nigeria? If we look at the corruption perception index, for instance, which is provided by Transparency International, then you and I and any other individual who is following through this conversation will definitely know that Nigeria is not doing or has not been doing very, very well as far as the corruption rankings in the world and in Africa are concerned. Nigeria is one of the most, let's be honest, one of the countries in Africa and the world with leading levels of corruption, unfortunately. So that simply gives you an indicator that even in terms of the financial systems, there's always there's been about these controversies concerning, like Nigerian entities, not just within Nigeria, but across the region and many other parts of the world. So your guess is as good as mine that there are structural weaknesses as far as tracking and tracing these monies that are paid to these bandits or any other associated armed groups which facilitate these kidnappings and abductions. So those are some of the issues which the government of Nigeria needs to narrow down and focus on. But your guess is as good as mine that in a country or in countries, not just Nigeria, but many other African countries that are struggling with the issues of armed conflicts, people in government, politicians in government and other wheeler dealers benefits from these monies. Look at the example of Sudan. It's a very good example. The rapid support forces, those guys have access to lots of monies, which are channeled and from the United Arab Emirates and many other countries, So these are the sorts of issues that if the government wanted to address this menace, nothing really prevents it from addressing. But poor governance, it's a hell of an issue to address, I think, for many African countries, David.
Poor governance is what again is the major situation all across Africa. But let me still stay with you, Mr. Sintati, before I go to Dr. Joseph. The development of rehabilitation, what's your position with that as well? Because this is something where quite a number of Africans, and I dare say at this point, people watching us right now from the diaspora is also talking about now things. Rehabilitating, they call them repentant terrorists, is a major moral booster for the fight against insecurity.
Rehabilitation, there are different moral sentiments and practical sentiments which are attached to the question or the issue of rehabilitating, like former terrorists or insurgents. However, I must state that it is, a gray area. It doesn't really automatically mean that if you rehabilitate, maybe let's say a former fighter, then they'll be able to integrate well with the members of the society. It is not given. However, there are cases where we have seen, especially in Nigeria, where former bandits, former terrorists, they surrender, then they are taken through different government programs, and then they are reintegrated to the back to the society. That has happened, and it's not just the case of Nigeria. Many other countries which have experienced extensive armed conflicts in Africa, including Liberia. Remember the civil war, Sierra Leone, in Somalia, in Mozambique, in the Congo. Uganda as well, South Sudan. Sometimes it can lead to good results, sometimes will not lead to good results. However, maybe the case of China in the Xinjiang region could be a good example. You remember in that particular region, an autonomous region of China, even though the conflict dynamics could be a little bit, fundamentally different from those of Nigeria or other African countries, but the Chinese government came up with a tailor-made specific educational program to reintegrate the so-called militants of that region, to orient them and reorient them to the extent that they accepted that it's only the Chinese state which has the sovereignty over any other territory that is considered part of China. So the reintegration of this and the rehabilitation of these former armed, fighters, could be insurgents, terrorists, bandits, is possible. In level, the moral sense issues, management issues of governance will be important, but I think also the quality bit of it is actually much more necessary. And we can be moral crusaders of good governance, or don't rehabilitate these terrorists and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I guess we also have to be much more practical. So it's an issue which is neither here or there, but at the end of the day, whether the terrorists are rehabilitated and they become good members of the society or not, what is much more important is the fact that stability and peace are collectively restored across the border. Yep.
All right, then. Let me take this conversation to Prof. Now, before we jump off this, I'm taking you on the economic reform contradiction question, because it's quite disturbing for me. The IMF says Nigeria's reforms have improved macroeconomy, and I did ask this earlier, have improved macroeconomic stability and estimates growth around 4% in 2025 and 4.1% in 2026. Yet, like I said earlier, poverty, food insecurity. I mean, with this level of insecurity in Nigeria, farmers rarely go to farm. Can the government honestly claim the economic transformation is really working? Plus, do African nations really have to consistently depend on IMF and their reports to get her stability and, of course, her figures when it comes to her economy in Africa?
Interesting question. Let me put it this way. When the government keeps on telling us that it is economically transforming an economy, or the economy is improving, we tend to be very cautious, because the citizens can know where the economy is very well. You don't need to tell them. So maybe the economy has grown by a certain percent, but a person in Abuja, a person in Kaduna, a person in Irorin, or anywhere else would ask the same question. If the economy has been growing, do I have money in my pocket? Do I have a job? Is poverty level going down? Can I pay my rent? Can I pay my school fees? Can I save some money? So what has been happening in many African countries is that the economy has been growing, but the inequality has also been growing. So a lot of people don't feel that effect. And that is why when the government keeps on saying that the economy is being transformed, a lot of people don't feel it because of that inequality. I always give an example of a forest. If you look at a forest, it looks very green. But if you go and look at individual trees, some trees have been cut, others are decaying, there are irrigators there are some trees there. So the best way to find out whether an economy is doing very well is not to ask the government, is not to ask the IMF, it is to go to the streets of Nigeria, the streets of Lagos, the streets of small cities, Ibadan, and so on, and ask the citizens, has your livelihood improved? Are you happy? Are you more fulfilled? Able to pay your expenditure? Are you able to save some money? Are you worried about tomorrow? Because those are the people who feel the negative and the positive effects of the economy, not IMF, not the government. The government and the IMF are too comfortable to understand the realities of the people on the ground.
All right, then. I understand now that Professor, I beg your pardon, Dr. Joseph has joined the conversation. Thank you so very much, Doctor, for rejoining the conversation. Before we move, I wanted to get to another conversation. But before we move, let me also get your take on the situation surrounding rehabilitation of these terrorists by the security operatives in Nigeria. It is practically repentant Boko Haram members. Do you think this is an intelligence ploy to curbing the level of insecurity that has Nigeria? Also, a particular, I call it negotiator between the terrorist and the Nigerian government, and I'm talking about say that these are cancerous now. Nature, you would caution rehabilitation of these terrorists, an intelligent plan to curb insecurity in Nigeria or even Africa, if it's deployed.
Maybe before we go to rehabilitation, it is always good to stop the bus from any front. Whether you're boarding a bus or you're boarding a train, never stop the bus from behind. The driver may never see you unless you have a very good driver who will be looking at the mirrors. So before we go and rehabilitate those who have already gone to Islamicism and bandism and criminology and all those, let's first make sure that we don't have new people joining the criminal gangs. That is one. Then going to rehabilitate, in the situation of war, there should always be room for those who are able to say, I surrender. For me, I've seen it live the other side. I want to come back home. And we cannot refuse them from coming. Always in many countries, they have always been welcomed. So rehabilitation is okay. It has always happened in many countries, even here in Uganda. Remember that Uganda, around from 1986, when Museveni came to power, up to about to 1990, about 20 years, we had over 35 rebel groups in Uganda. But now, as we talk, I'm not sure whether there's any yet. So some of those, they use military coercion, fighting, but also there was that approach that if you are willing to come back home, come, and you are taken into rehabilitation. They rehabilitate you mentally. They also rehabilitate you economically, socially, politically, and many more others. Like my other brother was saying that Sitati. Then now, once you are confirmed that you are now a good person, you can be taken to the community. But what I want to emphasize more, remember that at the Opul Skilling Foundation Africa, as you already know, we are targeting to train or to skill over 20 young people in Africa. Our wish that at one point in time, I need to come to Nigeria to transform economically some of the youth, those so that we don't rehabilitate them. If we leave it to government alone, this needs concerted efforts from almost all the stakeholders. The psychiatrists will come in, the economic people will come in, the other will come in. So we need a concerted effort of very many stakeholders. We don't leave it to government alone. And I am sure that, yes, there are many people who have already been in the bush there, and they're tired of being there because that life is never easy. You are always on the move, you don't sleep, you are missing your people, and many more others. It's never a comfortable life. Of course, when you are being seduced to join, it looks very attractive, magnetic. But when you are there, you find it actually very unpalatable to be there.
Well, again, this is a conversation that I like to want to. I mean, I'm seeing some of the panelists smiling on that particular reaction. But let me ask you, for clarity's sake, are you saying, Dr. Joseph, are you saying that people who have not only unalived other citizens, who have kidnapped and traumatized other citizens, if they choose to return back, they should be taken back and rehabilitated into the military? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
not just
I have
society,
said that
into the military.
Okay, you are saying it should be taken to the military, right? It has
Yes.
worked. It has worked in Uganda. Some of the rebel groups. First of all, what you should bear in mind, I have grown as a young person in a war zone. I have some of my brothers who used to be against government. Like there was one who used to be called Jesus Ojirot. He was a known rebel here in Uganda, and plus many more others. So those who surrendered and say, for us, we now want to work with the government. And some of them, maybe for the last 30 years, are still working in the government. You understand? So never judge people by their previous acts. Let's judge them by what they are looking forward for. So so I think I've clarified.
All right,
Yes, they can work in the army. They can also be taken back to the community. And from Uganda, it has worked. And of course, by the time when they take you to join the army, I am sure that you must have been sieved. They should have sieved you. They should have trained you. They should have polished you, so that when you go there, you are not a trouble person in one or another. It has worked here in Uganda, and I'm sure it can work there as well.
I, fantastic. That's actually where I wanted to affirm, because you did say it has worked in Uganda, but some would say what worked in Uganda might just not work in other countries. I mean, I'm seeing the comment section on YouTube, and a lot of people are saying to the likes of Professor, who has asked that Kenyan army should be. I mean, Nigeria should ask for help with the Kenyan government. That the Kenyan government, the Kenyan army might not even do it well enough to stop the level of insecurity. I mean, so much is happening on the comment section right now as we speak. But then again, let's switch a bit of gear from Nigerian story, take it back to Kenya. Now, I'm going to start with you, Prof. And this is particularly the situation that is surrounding the call an ICC probe on President William Ruto. Now, President William Ruto is facing renewed controversy over political violence and alleged use of organized groups, popularly known as goons, amid growing political tensions. Now, Ruto vows to crush goonism, as it were, as Mokomen dismisses national crisis claims. Even as William Ruto declares Mao eviction chapter closed, as 13,000 evictees received 200,000 Kenyan shillings each. A decision opposition groups have branded as politically motivated ahead of elections. Well, President Ruto has said that he will deal with violent actors, while opposition and civil society voices have pushed for international scrutiny, including calls involving the International Criminal Court. Now, the government has resisted external intervention, insisting that Kenyan institutions remain the very number one platform that can handle the situation. Prof, what's your reaction to this? Because again, this call for another level of scrutiny, particularly on President William Ruto, is coming at a time where the president did say a couple of days ago that the agencies should go hard on telling the people what they've done for them. I mean, what's your reaction holistically? Let's get your view.
That's a very multi-barreled question, but I'll react to it. I remember when the current president and the former president were taken to Hague or to ICC, we had a very big debate in parliament. And it was argued all over that Kenya has enough institutions to try those people in this country. They don't need to go to Hague. But then I remember a very famous statement, don't be vague, go to Hague. So they eventually went to Hague. But I think the bigger question is not even whether Kenyans should go to Hague or whether President Ruto should be taken to Hague or to ICC or not. The bigger question is, why should we be talking about violence in our country? So on one side of the opposition, they are saying that there are some goons that are being given support by the government. And the government is saying there are no goons. So there has been some very interesting conversations between the opposition and the government over insecurity, particularly the presence of goons. And what the opposition seems to have realized is that the threat of Hague seems to work. And maybe that's why the government has come up and said, wait a minute, we are going to crush goons. We are going to make sure there is peace. But I think the bigger issue is not whether to go to Hague or not. The bigger issue is we are going to post next year, and Kenyans are fearing that if appropriate measures are not taken, there could be violence. Remember, we had violence in 2007. We had violence in 1997. And Kenyans are fearing that if we don't take appropriate measures, including calling upon external or aid or external help, there could be chaos next year. And that nobody want that. So I think the president might not be taken to Hague, but the threat of Hague probably keeps everybody streamlined, in my opinion. Now, on the Mau eviction, there has been a big debate in this country about what are we doing to make voters vote in a certain way. So any action that the government is taking now is always interpreted in terms of 2027. Are you giving people favors? Are you trying to influence voters? Why are you doing it now and not before? So we are going to hear of such cases between now and 2027 as the government takes certain actions, and then we can debate whether they are because of voting in 2027 or because it is part of their work and part of their government responsibility.
I like the fact that you've also mentioned that part of it being politically motivated. Why now? Why not do it just 2 years into you being in the office? But that particular narrative, on one hand, is also being questioned by several political actors across the country. The recent support and love for the person of Edwin Sifuna is another conversation. Now, some are saying that President William Ruto seemed to be jittering, and I'm still staying with you, Prof, seemed to be jittering with that particular candidacy because former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua seemed to be towing the line of Edwin Sifuna. But it's neither here nor there, really. But looking at these calls, particularly on the Mao situation, do you think that the president is doing right with that level of funding being given at this time? Because again, it's looking like it's an inducement. What's your take as well?
It's very interesting that defining what is an inducement is very hard, because the government can always say this was in our budget, this is what we are planning for. I remember about 3 months ago there was a by-election in one of the constituencies, and the people in that constituency got a lot of goodies, gas cookers, blankets, mattresses, and so on. I remember one politician saying, wait a minute, this was in our budget. We wanted to give people gas cookers and so on. So the incumbent government always has certain advantages because it has resources, it has the budget, and so on. So there's a very thin line between what was the government program and what is in polling or election program. Very thin line. But the problem in Kenya now, or the problem we have in Kenya now is that a lot of information is available. So people can even go to the budget and say this was not in the budget or this was in the budget. And I can assure you that between now and 2027, there'll be a lot of such debates about what the government is doing now. Is it because it was the budget? Is it because it was in their program? Or is it because we are going to the polls next year? But always in Africa, not just Kenya, or African countries, the incumbent has a lot of political advantages, financial advantages, economic advantages that it can exploit. As to whether that will be advantageous in 2027, we can watch and wait.
All right, then. Let me take this conversation to Mr. Sintati, another person coming and joining us virtually from Kenya. Well, just in case, for the benefit of our viewing audience, just in case you're just tuning in, it is Pan-African Prism. And of course, we're talking everything Africa. We've just moved a bit from Nigeria, where the president of Nigeria has declared has asked for a major manhunt on kidnappers in the country. And of course, former Vice President Atiku has also declared, going into 2027, that we are dealing with thieves. Well, who is he calling thieves? We will be touching on that as well in the course of this conversation. Now, we're switching a bit to Nairobi, talking about where President calls on President William Ruto to, of course, be indicted again by the ICC. Point. Mr. Sintati, looking at again, the impact of these goons in the society cannot be overemphasized on the damage it causes, right? Just some few days ago around the Homa Bay area, there was some level of attacks by these same goons, and this is something that has been ongoing. In fact, There are also allegations of the fact that they are being shielded by the police in the country. Your take about this, plus the call for a fresh scrutinization of President William Ruto by the ICC.
Well, the issue of, I mean, these are organized relations by uh, that the politicians are affiliated. Uh, I mean, really, rightly so. Everybody is particularly by different politicians. I mean, they are all, you know, kind of expressive of feeling, suggesting that action to be taken
I don't know
against
if it's
the
just
politician.
me, but sorry, Mr. Sintati. I don't know if it's just me. We're struggling to hear you. And yes, I mean, you can see the other panelists saying it. We're struggling to hear you right now. So maybe you need to work around your microphone or something. I don't know what really happened, but your audio seemed to be muffled right now. So also would want to help us correct that from your end while I take this conversation to Uganda. I'm going to come back to you. And of course, please hold on your thought, but help us correct your audio. Let us know if it's very perfect now. Dr. Joseph, your take on this situation calls from opposition figures like where that the president be indicted again by the ICC. I mean, what's your take about this as well?
Yeah. First of all, opposition and those in government. Okay, Ruto versus opposition. First of all, we are all in one team, and one team called Kenya FC. You understand? Now, one of the players in Kenya FC is telling a referee that please give my colleague a yellow card, give my colleague a red card. Of course, we don't encourage the body play, stepping on people's legs, breaking other people, and many more others. Even if we're in the same team, we must play a fair game. People want to see the skills, want to see the talent, and many more others. So, for a member of the team to report a fellow member of the team to the referee, I think to me is not right. Uh, let the Kenyans, as Professor was saying, the problems of Kenyans are known by Kenyans. They say that a lizard that lies on the rock knows how hot it is than the lizard passing by. ICC does not sit in any rock in Nairobi. You understand? They are sitting in a Hague.
Yeah.
So the people who are feeling the pain, it is us, the Kenyans. So instead of taking the issues to ICC, are we able to discuss within Kenya? Of course, I know that I have been following the situation, all the political situation in Nairobi. Of course, the position will say, we don't have space. We have not been given space. We have tried to do ABCD, and it has failed. Even that reporting to ICC, it may not be in the very good or in the highest interest of the people of Kenya. It is in the highest interest of some of the individuals in the opposition. So I would like to say that, well, I don't support President William Ruto or if there are bad things he's doing. I can appreciate the good things that he's doing, but the wrong ones, certainly, I will not stand on them. So I would like to request if the president is using handed approach, where the opposition does not feel comfortable, dialogue with the president, the president should come down, should bend low and say, opposition, can you come? And then we talk. Because it has very many implications. Once, even if the president is taken to ICC and he is implicated there, I am sure some Kenyans are saying, no, bring back our head of state. You understand? So it's better to help to discuss those and solve those problems.
Okay, now I'm still going to stay with you. Let me stay with you. Let me stay with you, Doctor. And I really want to button on that thought of yours. The ICC does not prosecute every violent political rally under the Rome Statute. The evidence would need to point towards serious crimes forming part of a widespread or systematic attack against civilians. Now, my question would be, do the current incidents of consistent, they are called dooms, consistent incidents actually show that pattern? Or are politicians weaponizing the ICC for political pressure? Because again,
Now,
the election, is going to be going on in August 2027.
now, first of all, even if it's one Kenyan who has died, even if half a Kenyan has died, is a big problem. Half a Kenyan, let alone a full Kenyan, has died, is a problem. So we don't have to wait until the scale is big enough to warrant either ICC or international community to come on board. However small, whether
All
even
right.
those who have been injured, what, it is still a big concern to us. Now, what we are saying is that now, since 2027, we have elections in Nairobi. Everyone is positioning themselves. Opposition is trying to look at where can we stand on so that we stand tall, and therefore they are looking for anything to cling on, so that they can be able to use that maybe against the current president, who is sitting. That's William Ruto, Dr. His Excellency William Ruto. But what I was saying is that even if people are looking for positions, I want to give you a story of the monkey. You know, one monkey that is in front actually keeps on laughing the one behind. You understand? Even if any of the opposition right now comes to power, they might also be having the same challenges. Even William Ruto, when he came to power, I think he had issues with the Uhuru. Maybe he thought that when he comes to power, so even the one who's coming, it might still be the same. But what I want to say in summary is that how I wish we can learn that the international community has no business with our local issues. Let us solve our problems as the Kenyans, as the Africans, other than reporting them to ICC, to Trump, and many more others. And I can assure you that everyone has interest. Even ICC has interest. Even if we report to them, there is something they are interested in, not just prosecuting anyone. Even in Trump, when he comes to help, he has interest. He cannot inject his money for nothing. He wants profit out of something.
In other words, nothing is free in Freetown.
Absolutely. Yes.
Right, this conversation back to Kenya. Prof, while we still wait for Mr. Sintati to join the conversation, my question clearly is on the 2024 Gen Z question, as it were. In 2024, the Gen Z protest forced President William Ruto to withdraw the finance bill, you will recall, after Parliament was stormed and lives were lost. Now, did that episode teach the government that repression can actually intensify political resistance rather than eliminate it? Because just recently, just today or yesterday, the president also admitted that some people lost their loved ones in that particular protest. Do you think really that that episode really taught the government that repression can actually intensify political resistance rather than eliminate it?
I think when I look at what has been happening in this country, anytime the government comes up with a new policy, a new law, a new regulation, and the Kenyan people talk about it or react to it, the government has been very quick in making changes. For example, there was a time when the fuel price went up substantially, people complained, and the government put down the price or reduced the prices, and even called some small-scale matatu operators or minibus or taxi drivers and told them, wait a minute, next month we are going to reduce the prices. So I think because of Generation Z, the government has become sensitive to how the ordinary Kenyans think about it and their sentiments. But I think some people feel that that sensitivity is not good enough. It should be more than that. They feel that the government should probably go beyond the changes it has made and make deep deeper changes economically, politically, and legally to make sure that the Generation Z and other people who are disadvantaged are included in the economic system. Only then will the government are we going to see real changes. But clearly, the government learned its lesson that if you don't listen to the people, if you don't listen to the voters, you may end up losing. And I think that is the thinking that is driving the government as we go towards 2027. And that's why you are seeing a lot of changes, a lot of, like the one you mentioned earlier about people getting compensation for the land they were evicted from. And you can be sure that between now and 2027, there will be other changes to make sure that people feel included.
All right, and thank you so much. Here now that Mr. Sintati has joined the conversation again. Mr. Sintati, thank you so very much for joining. Let's get your view while you were talking at the time, because again we couldn't hear you. So your take as well on this situation.
Well, I hope I'm audible enough, David, to proceed.
Very audible, very audible.
All right, perfect. So initially, before I dropped out, I had mentioned that you see, the reality is these goons, the so-called goons. I mean, these are politically influenced militias. It's not the first time. I mean, it's nothing new really when you look at the political history of the country. The only unfortunate thing is that at some particular stage, as a country matures politically, you'd expect that within the current constitution of dispensation, and the fact that these are challenges which have been there before, then hopefully at this stage you don't really expect violence to be taking place. Unfortunately, the cabinet secretary in charge of the Ministry of Interior and National Administration has been making extremely controversial, remarks. I mean, he's politicizing this issue of insecurity, especially on the fact that the goons are wreaking havoc on these rallies, political rallies by the opposition. The fact of the matter remains that the president himself leads, he heads the National Security Council. That's a fact. The cabinet secretary in charge of the Ministry of Interior sits on that council. The head of the Directorate of Criminal Investigations is as well, as well sits on that particular council. Um, the Inspector General of Police, and many other fellows you could think of based on the constitutional provision. You cannot convince any other Kenyan that all these fellows who had these critical state offices are not aware of whoever is organizing, financing these particular armed groups, you know? So, if at all we are going to address this issue, then it should start with the fellows who are affiliated with the administration of the day, and they are very well known. So this issue of using violence to intimidate political opponents, I mean, it's something which is backward, and I think one of the most primitive, kind of happenstances to witness in a country like Kenya, which is considered to be a little bit politically mature than these other neighboring states. So, as to whether this issue will be addressed, that is highly doubtful. I really doubt if this particular issue is going to be conclusively addressed as we speak. And as Professor Iraqi mentioned earlier on, this, it appears as if these are drums of war that are being currently sounded as we head towards the 2027 election. So, unfortunately, we might get to a point where citizens may take issues in their own arms and say, okay, if the government does not want to protect us as the people, especially affiliated with opposition candidates, then we shall be able to take matters into our own hands, David.
Okay, now looking at this particular situation of the goons, I want us to look critically at the what I call the double standard question, really, because the government is accusing opposition figures of mobilizing goons, while the opposition accuses government-linked actors of doing the same. Now, why shouldn't there be an independent investigation that examines both sides, the government and the opposition, and of course the monies that follows in between, the phone records, the transport networks, and even the organizers. Why do you think there can't be some level of independent investigation in all of this, Mr. Sintat?
Well, talking about independent investigations, constitutionally, the National Police Service is mandated to investigate all manner of incidents or actions that threaten law and order in Kenya. That is a fact. Under that, we have the Directorate of Criminal Investigation. I mean, unfortunately, all these agencies, if you look at them clearly, and rightly so, they are politicized. That's the problem. So you cannot expect a
Mm.
police service whose members, when you have political protests, they are the ones who are even walking around with these so-called goons. These rugged police officers. I mean, chasing after the opposition supporters of the opposition. How do you expect fellows now to sit down investigations leading to a conclusive address and effective one on this particular issue? So the entire system is highly compromised, and I don't see how we are going to get to an end where this issue is rooted out of the Kenyan society.
Interesting. Let me go to Prof, and I'm going to ask this.
Polity, for that matter, I just don't see
Okay,
that.
now let me go to Prof really, and I'm going to ask the same question, Prof. Like I said earlier, right? The government accuses opposition figures of mobilizing these goons, while the opposition as well, accuses the government-linked actors of doing the same. Why shouldn't there be an independent investigation that examines both sides? I mean, the government and of course the opposition, and of course trace the money, the phone records, transport, whatever it is, to making sure that there is a long-lasting solution to these particular situations of goons. Because if insecurity is not properly handled, it goes overboard, just like we see in several parts of Africa.
If I meet my neighbor Sitati here on the streets of Nairobi and give him a slap, I just slapped him on the face, you can be sure in the next 5 minutes I'll be arrested. So I don't understand how somebody can be carrying weapons, some rungus and some weapons walking around the streets of Nairobi or any other city in Kenya, and nobody arrests him. The government has a monopoly of violence anywhere in the world. So I think the question should not be whether the government is sponsoring goons or whether the opposition is sponsoring goons. The government, the backstop is the government. The government has intelligence, the government has a police, the government has every legitimate means to find out who is in charge of the goons, who is funding them. So the fact that how can the government be blaming the opposition when it has all the power, when we voted for it? So I think at the end of the day, I would blame the government for not stopping the growth of goons. It doesn't matter whether they are coming from the opposition or from itself. We should stop goonism before it runs out of hand. Because tomorrow, today I see goons using rungus and other small weapons. Tomorrow they might end up getting dangerous weapons like guns, and particularly as we head towards 2027. And as my colleague said, there are better ways of resolving issues, not fighting each other on the streets. The government should stop that. That is why you voted for it. That's why it has monopoly of violence.
All right then, because of our time, really, let's jump into another conversation. But I would like also to get the view of Dr. Joseph's question. Why do you think there cannot be a major investigation either of the on the part of the government or the part of the opposition independently to put to bed the situation of these goons, because they are becoming a major menace all across Nairobi, just like you find them even in Nigeria, that is popularly called area boys?
First of all, in Nairobi, we have what we call DCI, Directorate of Criminal Intelligence. Even by the name, you are able to know what they do. So they are supposed to give us the intelligence briefing on what is happening within the country, especially those who are trying to destabilize the country. I've been following that story. I've not yet had any communication or even any press statement, a press release from DCI in Nairobi. So your statement that, or your question as to whether we should appoint independent investigator. First of all, who's going to appoint the independent investigator? Are you telling me that the player, whether it is the government, whether it is opposition, will they appoint a referee who is going to officiate the same match that they are going to play? So, like my colleagues have clearly said, everyone, even a person who left his head at home, sometimes some people leave their brains at home. They go to Nairobi without their brains. But even anyone who has gone to Nairobi, left his brain at home, at least is able to know that this is something. Something has to do with government. Some tricks being played here and there. So we cannot get any clear investigation, independent investigation, because it appears people in government are grossly or even 100% involved in this. You understand? Yeah.
All right, then let's switch to another conversation. And this time around, we'll be going to we'll be lumping two stories together. One from South Africa and the other Ghana. Now, I would also want to say this for the benefit of our viewing audience. If you're just tuned in right now, you can please like and share this link across socials so that the rest of Africa can also be a part of this conversation, because what we do here in prison, right here on PETV Media, is to making sure that Africa finds her feet again with true leadership, true governance, and of course, telling our stories ourselves. That is a major reason we are doing what we're doing. And of course, I have this fine gentleman all across Africa, from Nairobi and of course to Uganda, joining the conversation today. Let's go straight to another conversation. Now, interesting, this is coming out of Africa, where President Cyril Ramaphosa has vowed that people responsible for violence against African foreign nationals will face arrest and prosecution. Now, the controversy comes, the controversy comes amid growing anti-immigrant sentiment, with questions about xenophobia, unemployment, undocumented migration, and whether political actors are exploiting public frustration. Ramaphosa, of course, has rejected claims that his government tolerates xenophobia. Now, I said we're going to be lumping it together. In Ghana, the Ghanaian government has rejected a proposed 20 million cedis donation by MTN Ghana, intended to support Ghanaians affected by xenophobic attacks in South Africa. Now, these Ghanaians are the ones that have returned home. The decision has generated controversy over whether the government should have accepted the private sector assistance, and of course, whether rejecting it sends a diplomatic or political message to South Africa. Now, like I said, we're lumping these two stories together. Gentlemen, let me start off with Prof. The Ghanaian government is rejecting a donation by, I want to call them a private company, but of course of a South African origin. 20 million Ghanaian cedis rejected. Cyril Ramaphosa on one side is saying, look, I would not tolerate xenophobic attacks. But then some are saying that talk is cheap. There is you saying one thing on one hand, and then these South Africans go carrying out these acts of dragging non-South Africans out and handing them over to the immigration office. What do you make of this particular story, as it were, Prof? Your reaction, basically.
I think I would start with the compensation by MTN, which I think is based in South Africa. I think the Ghanaians are doing the right thing. Because being uprooted from your business, from where you have lived for years, and being chased away and going back to your country cannot be priced. You cannot price that. So the other question is, when that money is given to Ghana, how is it going to be shared? How much is each person going to get? So I think I see that as a diversion, instead of focusing on the root cause of the problems in South Africa. Why is there violence? Why are people being uprooted from their businesses or from their homes? So one of the questions that I've been asking is, the government of South Africa should not be threatening to arrest people who are behind xenophobia. They should have arrested them. They should have even stopped that. Because it's not the first time. Remember, it's not the first time that has happened in South Africa. It has happened again. It's happening again and again.
Right.
So we're asking, where was the government when that was happening? The same way we're asking about Kenya, where was the government when goons were walking along the streets? And again, that takes back to the institutions that we build in Africa. Our institutions should be tough enough, should be deep enough to preempt a crisis, not deal with it. So we should not be having xenophobia in South Africa, because these are our brothers and sisters. In fact, if I walk around the streets of South Africa, and I walked there, people will talk to me in Zulu or in Xhosa, because they don't even know that I'm South African. And when Nigerians or Ghanaians come to Kenya, people talk to them in Swahili because they look like them. So I think the issue should not be compensation. The issue is getting the root cause of the problem and making sure that such xenophobic attacks become part of the past. They are, as one of the speakers said earlier, they are spoiling the image of Africa and perpetuating a stereotype that we cannot be at peace with ourselves.
Okay, now what's your take about the sentiments as President William Ruto is saying, I beg your pardon, Cyril Ramaphosa is saying that he would not tolerate xenophobic attack. But then, on one hand, he says something. His people tweet moments after. I mean, just for instance, the last broadcast he made on a Sunday, on a Monday, the people went ahead still dragging non-South Africans from their homes and handing them over. In fact, to the point of attacking them and their business places. What's your take with the body language of the presidency in South Africa as well? Prof.
Remember that at the end of the day, every politician in South Africa, whether in Nigeria, whether in South Africa, whether in Kenya, always think about the votes. So as xenophobic attacks are taking place, as Ghanaians are talking about compensation and so on, at the end of the day, a voter or a reader should not annoy the voters. That's why sometimes you find some very unexpected reaction to political violence in Africa and other countries. Because at the end of the day, you must think about your constituents, your voters. Because when the Ghanaians are home and Kenyans are home, South Africans will be right there. There are the people who will be going to vote and decide who is going to be our leader. And that's why you find politicians speaking a language you don't expect.
Well, something a lot of parents are going to be interested in. You looking at this development, any level of African. Now, he did clearly state that whoever is responsible for violence against African foreign nationals will face arrest and prosecution. In the protest that did happen some weeks back, you would recall that over 100 Indians were arrested as a result of that protest. The statement was that the body of African government, but the people who are correct do it on.
First of all, whatever the president is doing and the government is doing is all a crocodile tears. That is number one. Like Professor Irati was saying,
Oh dear.
This should have not happened, first of all. Government could not detect, first of all, to detect that this was going to happen, let alone saying that we are going to arrest those who did so. So to me, the president and the government of South Africa are only doing pretext because some of them are experiencing the consequences of the so-called xenophobia. And first of all, I also love the fact that they are highly blindfolded, that the foreigners okay, non-South Africans are taking their jobs. My friend, anyone who understands basic economics knows that if I go to Nairobi, I must use a matatu, I must eat ugali, I will sleep in a hotel, and many more others. So the more people you have all come to your country, there are many economic benefits. Unfortunately, even worse of all, the people they are targeting, and these are the people who have gone there to open businesses, to open their enterprises, and many more others. And the South Africans should be working there, and these people are paying taxes, and many more others. So I am highly hurt and offended by the fact that not only the South Africans, many African citizens say the Ugandans have taken our jobs, the Kenyans have taken our jobs, the what have done ABCD. That is not correct. Let's look at the bigger picture, that what is the contribution of these people? What are the contribution of the Kenyans, the Nigerians, the what in South Africa? And I can assure you that there is a lot. If we did the analysis, the cost benefit analysis of other Africans being in South Africa, their contribution and being out, I can assure you that even when other Africans are not in South Africa, the South Africans still have high unemployment. Poverty levels are still high. So whoever is lying them that the problems that they are going through is because of other African countries, that is a global lie. 100%. And then you're talking about the issue of the MTN. The Ghanaians have refused donations from MTN. Like Professor said, MTN is a South African company. And they are already envisaging that the Ghanaians are going to actually to revolt against MTN. They will stop using MTN and all their services. That donation is not coming in good faith. It is because they have sensed danger ahead of them.
Let's just not allow those to have take Nairobi. Looking at the 20 million Ghanaian citizens to people who were affected by the xenophobic attack in Africa. The floor of the House also should react to how much of these would both is and base should be the same to in their country.
Well, David, from the outset, I'd want to mention the fact that the amount of money supposedly that the MTN group intended to pay to the Ghanaians as compensation, it sounds or looks like a backhanded bribe of a sort, and of course, if the Ghanaian government would take that particular amount of money, what happens next is the fact that South Africans or the South African government would then now start maybe politicizing the issue, probably, and maybe asking the Ghanaian government why they ended up taking the money in case of any other reprisal attacks in South Africa. But in any case, that particular bribe as well, we've had sentiments from Ghana, from Nigeria, whereby even in the past, especially in the case of Nigeria, the students, I think association, the National Students Association at one point intended to hold protests outside the MTN group and maybe target other South African interests in the country, Ghana as well.
Mm.
So probably that payment by MTN was to, some public relations, gimmicks meant maybe to tame attacks or to show in good faith that we are particularly sorry in case, in the event of, the deaths and injuries that were targeted towards the Ghanaians that were in South Africa when that those particular attacks took place. However, I think it is much more important to look at the bigger picture at this point. During the mother of protest, the D-Day of the anti-immigrant protest that took place on the 30th of June this year. I mean, since that particular day, since that fateful day, what we've seen 2 months now down the line is the fact that even South African nationals themselves, purportedly the industries and the enterprises where they went to replace the foreigners who left, I mean, the owners of those enterprises are, they are complaining, they are experiencing losses, given the fact that there is this particular scale gap in relation to or comparing the foreigners who left and the South Africans who were employed to take over. So those are the particular nuances which I believe those are the challenges which South Africa is going to live with for some time. The last thing which maybe I'd want to mention, David, is the fact that you see, if Africans from other parts of the continent will decide to retaliate against, could be South African nationals or interests in other parts of the continent, then I guess that won't really be in good faith. I mean, people are free, to do what they please or want, but I don't really think in the spirit of being Africans that would be wise enough of a thing to do. But it calls into question the fact that the various regional economic blocs that we have across Africa, and even the aspirations of the African Union, the Agenda 2063, the visa free travel around the continent, these are the particular issues which we need to call into question. So, where is the future of Africa if we cannot allow free movement across the continent, then where are we placed to be as far as the intercontinental, or rather the inter-African trade is concerned? So if these issues are not addressed, then the bigger picture, in my view, is the fact that we are going to suppress trade amongst ourselves, given the fact that mobility within the continent would account for significant, proportion of trade within or amongst ourselves as states within the continent.
Before we jump off this, I'm going to sit down and we're going to be economy of that rate is now people unemployed. How much to these my how much is an equation that redirected towards foreigners? That is actually politically.
Well, I guess at this point, David, there's not so much left in the case of South Africa. If at all, South Africans, the fellows who are going to feel, or rather they are feeling the largest impact of the fact that foreigners left the country. And I guess it will take some time before certain sectors of the economy will be able to significantly recover from these threats, xenophobic threats for that matter. Yep.
coming out of, like I said earlier, 3%. And that million young people, do you think that politically motivated by politicians as a national, this even going to hold on the economy? This impact in the year. Some of these foreign migrants left.
I think, first of all, in the recent times, I've been trying to do international migration, continental migration, regional, and all those. If you look at international migration, you look at the people who are crossing from West Africa through the Mediterranean, they want to go to Spain and all those ones. Now, following the recent World Cup, it is the migrants who won the World Cup. The person who gave the pass that brought the goal, Williams, is a migrant. You understand? So we like to open the scope of what we call yes, or what we call migration or immigrants. And the issues of poverty and unemployment in South Africa are not caused by the foreigners. It is caused by the South Africans themselves. Because the medicine to poverty is very clear. Medicine to unemployment is very clear. We must have good startups. And can you imagine that in the whole of Africa, African continent, we only contribute 1% to global business startups. The whole of Africa, we only contribute 1% to the global business startups for globally. So meaning that our rates of starting businesses, whether Kenya, Uganda, South Africa, is very low or even small. So we must train young people to start businesses. Those are the businesses that will eventually grow in the future after 5-10 years, and the jobs will be there. But chasing, even if you chase all non-South Africans from South Africa, problem not yet solved.
Let me
it's very interesting how South Africa economy is not growing as fast as expected. I've just checked online and I found it was growing at around 1% last year. The previous year it was 0.5%. So instead of politicians taking the blame and taking the gauntlet and saying the economy is not doing very well, let's transform it by making sure it is growing faster. They are looking for scapegoats. Before other African countries, we had apartheid, the white people. Now we have forgotten about the apartheid. Now we are focusing on the immigrants. And let's accept a fact that the problem in South Africa is not because of immigrants. If you go to the US or European Union or other countries, immigrants are seen as an asset. They are better innovators. They are better entrepreneurs. Why should we see them as enemies? So let the government face the reality that does not transform the economy and do what's supposed to do instead of blaming the migrants.
all right then. All right. About the party is competition. To retrieve the he needs to
Let me be controversial for once.
okay. Mentality, or I guess it's very do you think from talking for
Well, as you've rightly put it, politicians will always talk. And I think the virtue of the fact that Atiku Abubakar at one point served as the vice president, he's not clean either. I mean, in the past, there have been allegations about his persona and his conduct when he was in office. I mean, at one time, there were allegations about, money laundering claims, and this went as far as, the United States. It was alleged that he had some dealings, in an offshore island, and a few others. So this is the language of politicians, and Atiku Abubakar is, he's a highly experienced politician who has been there for a very long time. So it is that silly season, as we say it in Kenya, where politicians will make any other statement to be able to gain, to gain political capital out of it. But I think the bigger picture at this point, as far as the Nigerian presidential elections are concerned, is to whether the opposition will be able to at least front a single, solid, strong candidate who can be able to take, strongly and challenge the incumbent President Bola Tinubu. Whether that is going to happen is something to ponder about. But how I look at it from the information I have on Nigeria, it could be a little bit difficult. I mean, bringing the likes of Atiku Abubakar together with the likes of Peter Obi and others to be able to field a single opposition presidential candidate. So for Atiku Abubakar, I mean, those are just sentiments. I mean, at the end of the day, of an opposition politician, and whoever is contesting for the presidency is free to, make whatever sentiments he or she feels like, David.
all and now coalition is to is uh, going to
Press had contradicted me.
your oh, this
It's very interesting how politicians, when they are not in power, can say anything. In fact, if you get a Atiku statement and you go to another country in Africa, it will be exactly the same. You just need to remove the name. But when they get to power, they do completely opposite. So my hope is that our politicians were more honest, they were more truthful, so that they don't just complain because they're not in power. When they get to power, they behave differently. So I am hoping about the day Africans will have more honest politicians, will be more truthful, and will be able to say exactly what they mean. For now, it's just politics as usual.
This he comes now. Horrible has him left the center. But
I think that's what Nigerians have been waiting for. That's what Kenyans have been waiting for. That's what every African country has been waiting for. Strong institutions that can make sure there is free and fair elections and democracy can flourish. But what I see from Nigeria and many other African countries is that there's too many political vested interests. So it's very hard to have free and fair elections. But I can give Nigeria the benefit of doubt that maybe for the first time in history, you're going to have free and fair elections and everybody will be satisfied and the best candidate will win. But until that has happened, we can only watch and wait.
well,
Well, unfortunately, and to concur with what Professor Iraqi has mentioned, is the fact that most of these institutions of governance, they are captured by uh, some wheeler dealers and other external actors. That's quite unfortunate. In the history of Nigeria, I think having tracked political developments over in Nigeria, including the better part of this year in relation to the forthcoming elections, I have my doubts and very high doubts that the elections will be free and fair. I haven't seen. I don't think so much has changed over the last, 4 years to strongly indicate that the Independent National and Electoral Commission is better positioned to conduct free and fair elections from January next year. I don't see that. I'm not really convinced. So for Africa, then it will take time. I mean, political maturation, it's a slow evolving process, as many African countries have demonstrated, and it's a harsh reality, and which we will have to get accustomed to as Africans. We can only hope that in time, then things will be able to become much better.
Thank you.
Good night.